Welcome to Impact History, where we explore the pivotal moments that define nations and shape our world. Every great empire rises from the ashes of what came before, and few stories of transformation are as dramatic or as profound as that of Japan's Tokugawa Shogunate. It's a tale of order forged from chaos, and of a peace so enduring it would redefine a nation. Today we journey back to this time of unparalleled stability and startling isolation. We'll uncover the fascinating story of a military government, the Bakufu, established in 1603 by the master strategist Tokugawa Ieyasu. This shogunate would rule Japan with an iron fist for over 2.5 centuries, bringing an end to endless war. This was an era of profound contradictions, a time when the sword was laid down, yet the samurai class remained supreme, a period of deliberate seclusion from the outside world that paradoxically gave rise to an explosion of unique art, culture, and urban life. From the vibrant, bustling streets of Edo to the serene landscapes that inspired generations of artists, the Tokugawa period forged the very foundations of modern Japan. If you're fascinated by the intricate dance of power, peace, and cultural evolution, and how one leader's vision can bring an end to a century of bloodshed, then you're in the right place. Join our community of history lovers by subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the past. Our story begins with the chapter, The Establishment of the Tokugawa Shogunate. To truly understand the monumental peace the Tokugawa brought, we must first step into the relentless chaos that preceded it. The late 1500s marked the culmination of Japan's infamous Sengoku period, the Age of Warring States. For over a century, the country had been a fractured mosaic of domains, each ruled by a powerful warlord or daimyo, all vying for ultimate control. It was a brutal, relentless era of shifting allegiances, political intrigue, and constant bloody conflict that tore the nation apart. For over a century, Japan was consumed by the Sengoku period, the Age of Warring States. Central authority had vanished, leaving ambitious warlords, the daimyos, to fight endlessly for supremacy. In this ruthless era of Gekkokujo, the low overthrowing the high alliances were fragile and betrayal was rampant. The ultimate prize was the unification of Japan under a single sword. Out of this chaos rose Tokugawa Ieyasu, a survivor of a childhood spent as a political hostage. Ieyasu learned the arts of patience and long-term strategy. While his predecessors Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi nearly unified the realm through force, Ieyasu played the long game, carefully building his power base and waiting for the perfect moment to seize control. That moment came in 1600. Japan's daimyo split into two factions, the Western Army, loyal to the heir of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and the Eastern Army, led by Ieyasu. They met at the Battle of Sekigahara, the most decisive battle in samurai history. Through battlefield tactics and prearranged betrayals that saw key enemy generals switch sides, Ieyasu won a crushing victory, ending a century of civil war in a single day. With military supremacy secured, Ieyasu sought political legitimacy. In 1603, he was appointed shogun by the emperor, making him the de facto ruler of the nation. He then moved the seat of government to his own castle town of Edo, modern-day Tokyo. This act founded the Tokugawa Shogunate, launching the 250-year-long Edo period. The shogunate's primary goal was to ensure lasting peace. This Pax Tokugawa was achieved through a sophisticated system of control. The regime established the Bakuhan system, a centralized feudalism where the shogun in Edo held ultimate authority. The daimyo could rule their own domains, but under strict regulations. The most ingenious of these was Sankin Kotai, or alternate attendance. Daimyo were forced to spend every other year in Edo, and their families were kept there as permanent hostages, draining their wealth and preventing rebellion. To further cement stability, society was organized into a rigid four-tiered hierarchy. At the top were the samurai, who transitioned from warriors to a ruling class of administrators. Below them were the peasants, the farmers who produced the nation's wealth. Third were the artisans, and at the bottom were the merchants. Though officially the lowest class, the merchants would grow incredibly wealthy, creating a new source of social and cultural power. Fearing foreign influence, the shogunate enacted the sakoku, or closed country policy. This was a strict control of foreign relations, mainly to eradicate Christianity, which the regime saw as a destabilizing force. Japanese citizens were forbidden from traveling abroad, and most foreigners were barred from entry. The only exception was a highly restricted trading post for the Dutch and Chinese at Dejima Island in Nagasaki, a tiny window to the outside world. This long peace fostered unprecedented economic growth and a vibrant urban culture. As cities like Edo swelled, a new floating world or ukiyo emerged, dedicated to entertainment. This was the golden age of kabuki theater with its dramatic performances and ukiyo-e woodblock prints, which captured the stylish world of actors and courtesans. It was also the era of great poets like Matsuo Basho, who perfected the evocative art of haiku. Religion was also brought under state control. While Christianity was ruthlessly suppressed, Buddhism and Shinto were used to reinforce social order. Every family was forced to register with a Buddhist temple, a system that doubled as a national census and a tool for surveillance, ensuring compliance with the shogunate's authority. The Tokugawa policy of sakoku, or closed country, is often seen as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a remarkably successful strategy for self-preservation. While European powers were carving up the globe, Japan remained sovereign, a world unto itself. By expelling foreign missionaries and traders, the shogunate neutralized the threat of colonial encroachment that had subjugated so many other nations. The Shimabara Rebellion in 1637, a peasant uprising with strong Christian elements, had solidified the regime's fears, leading them to sever almost all ties with the outside world. For over 2 centuries, Japan was shielded from the disruptive forces of Western imperialism and religious conflict. But this shield came at a significant cost. While Europe was experiencing the seismic shifts of the scientific revolution and the dawn of industrialization, Japan was in a state of arrested technological development. The limited window to the west, the tiny man-made island of Dejima in Nagasaki harbor, allowed only a trickle of Dutch learning, or rangaku. It kept Japan from complete ignorance, but it was a footnote compared to the torrent of progress transforming the West. This self-imposed isolation meant that when the outside world finally came knocking, it would do so with overwhelming force. That knock came in 1853, with the arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry's Black Ships. The steam-powered warships bristling with modern cannons were a terrifying spectacle, a floating demonstration of a technology gap that had widened into a chasm. The shogunate was forced to sign treaties that opened Japan to foreign trade, ending over 200 years of isolation. This shock ignited a period of intense national crisis and introspection, ultimately leading to the collapse of the shogunate itself. Yet, the Tokugawa era had inadvertently prepared Japan for the challenge. Centuries of peace had fostered a unified culture, high literacy rates, a sophisticated bureaucracy, and a bustling domestic economy. This pent-up potential was unleashed in the Meiji Restoration. In a remarkably short period, Japan embarked on a frantic top-down modernization drive under the slogan, "Enrich the country, strengthen the military." Feudal domains were replaced with prefectures, the samurai class was abolished, and a modern conscript army was created. Japan devoured Western technology, politics, and culture, transforming itself from a feudal backwater into a major industrial and military power, shaping the formidable nation we know today. Beyond politics and economics, the Tokugawa era left behind an indelible cultural legacy. The peace and stability allowed for an explosion of arts and culture. The floating world of ukiyo-e woodblock prints, the dramatic flair of kabuki theater, and the minimalist beauty of haiku poetry all flourished. The samurai code of Bushido was refined from a practical warrior's ethic into a national philosophy emphasizing discipline, honor, and loyalty. This legacy of order, aesthetic refinement, and collective duty remains a cornerstone of Japanese identity. But history is never inevitable. The world we know is the result of countless turning points. What if the dice had fallen differently? What if Tokugawa Ieyasu had lost at the Battle of Sekigahara? If the Western Army, led by Yoshida Mitsunari, had been victorious, the Tokugawa Shogunate would never have existed. Power would have remained with the Toyotomi clan, which was far more open to foreign trade and Christianity. Japan might have avoided isolation, but it's unlikely it would have found peace. Without Ieyasu's political genius for centralization, the country would have likely remained a patchwork of feuding daimyo. This persistent division would have been a fatal weakness. Ambitious European powers like Spain or Portugal could have easily exploited these rivalries, backing one clan against another in a classic divide-and-conquer strategy. Japan might have been fractured into a series of colonial outposts, its sovereignty and unique culture erased by imperial ambition. What if Japan had embraced Christianity instead of banning it? The shogunate's fear of Christianity was fundamentally a fear of a rival authority, the Pope in Rome. If Japan had instead embraced the faith, its history would have taken a radical turn. It could have become a powerful Christian kingdom in Asia, forming deep alliances with Catholic Europe. This might have spurred a fascinating cultural fusion, blending Christian theology with Japanese philosophy and aesthetics. However, it could have also imported Europe's brutal religious wars, pitting Catholic converts against Buddhist traditionalists. More ominously, it might have paved the way for colonization. In the Philippines, Spanish missionaries were the vanguard of colonial rule. A Christian Japan might have found itself slowly absorbed into a European empire, its spiritual conversion a prelude to its political submission. What if the Tokugawa Shogunate had pursued global trade instead of isolation? Before Sakoku was fully implemented, Japanese Red Seal ships were active traders across Southeast Asia. If the shogunate had encouraged this instead of banning it, Japan could have become a major maritime empire. With its shipbuilding skills and seafaring population, Japan could have competed directly with the Dutch and Portuguese for control of the lucrative spice trade. Japanese trading posts might have dotted the coasts of Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. Its ships could have crossed the Pacific to the Americas or sailed the Indian Ocean, fundamentally reshaping global trade networks and becoming a colonial power in its own right, centuries before the Meiji era. What if merchants had risen in power instead of samurai? The Tokugawa social structure was a rigid hierarchy with the samurai at the top and merchants at the bottom. But economically the reality was inverted. Merchants in cities like Osaka and Edo amassed vast fortunes while many samurai struggled with debt. If this economic power had translated into political power, Japan's entire social fabric would have been rewoven. A merchant-led Japan would have prioritized commerce, capital, and innovation over feudal loyalty and agrarian tradition. This could have spurred an earlier organic transition toward capitalism and perhaps even a form of representative government, creating a society more like the merchant republics of Renaissance Italy than a feudal shogunate. And finally, what if the shogunate had lasted beyond the 19th century? For the shogunate to survive the arrival of the West, it would have needed to reform. But its very structure was resistant to the kind of radical change required. A slow, hesitant modernization would have left it vulnerable. It's far more likely that Japan would have suffered the same fate as Qing China. Western powers, seeing a weak and divided nation, would have carved it into spheres of influence, seizing control of ports and resources. Japan would have entered the 20th century not as a rising empire, but as a semi-colonized pawn in the great game of global imperialism. The balance of power in Asia during the world wars would be unrecognizable, and the world we live in today would be profoundly different. The Tokugawa Shogunate reshaped Japan into a land of peace, order, and tradition, yet also created limits that shaped its destiny in unexpected ways. From towering castles to timeless art, its influence is still felt today. History isn't just about what happened. It's also about imagining what could have happened. If you enjoyed this journey through Japan's past, be sure to subscribe to Impact History and join us again for more stories that change the world.